Hi everyone, this is a video that is going to teach you um, about percent composition. You want to go ahead and grab some paper so you can take notes. You will then use these notes to complete the activity. So percent composition tells you by mass the percent of each element in a compound. It tells you by mass the percent of each element in a compound. So when we do percent composition, you're going to need to use your periodic table. So make sure you have your periodic table handy. Now you're going to want to remember when you use your periodic table, and when you take the masses off of the periodic table, you want to round them to 2 decimal places before you use them. So let's go ahead and try a simple example. Let's do H2O. Now, sometimes when you do percent composition, it will simply say, determine the percent composition of this compound. And sometimes it will say, determine the percent composition of, and then it will give you a specific element. So you just have to kind of see what the problem is asking you for. So for this one here, let's just do the percent composition of the compound. So what that's going to mean is that we're going to have 2 answers, one for the hydrogen and one for the oxygen. So the first thing we want to do is get the molar mass of this compound. And if you set this up exactly like me, it will be really easy to do your percent composition. So set it up the exact same way as me. So for your molar mass, we have 2 hydrogens. So we're going to put 2 times, and when you look on your periodic table and find hydrogen and round it to 2 decimal places, the mass is 1.01 plus, and then we have 1 oxygen, so we're going to round its mass to 16.00, and that's going to give us 18.02, and that would be grams per mole. That is our molar mass. Now, if you think about percentage, if you want to know the percentage of people in a group with blonde hair, you would take the part that you're looking for, blonde hair, divided by the total amount of people in the group. Then you would take that times 100. So the same thing is true here. You want to take the part that you're looking for. In this case, we're looking for the percent of hydrogen and the percent of oxygen. And then you're going to divide that by the total. The total is the 18.02. So since we have it written this way, it's really easy. We're simply going to take the part that's hydrogen and put it over our total, which is 18.02. And then we're going to take the part that's oxygen and put it over the total, 18.02. Now, because these are percentages, you need to make sure that you take your answer times 100. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and grab my calculator. And for my calculator, for the first one, I'm going to do 2 times 1.01, enter, and then divided by 18.02, enter, and then times 100. Okay, now the answer that I get is going to look like this in my calculator. All right. But you want to go ahead and write your answer to 2 decimal places. So for this one here, we're going to round it to 2 decimal places. That 9 will round the 0. So then the answer is going to be 11.21%. So the percent of hydrogen will be 11.21%. Now to get your oxygen, there's 2 ways you could do this. As you know, percentages are out of 100. So if we only have 2 things here, the hydrogen and the oxygen, if out of 100, the hydrogen part is 11.21, then whatever's left over would be your oxygen. So to find the oxygen, and I'll just write it over here as an alternate way, you could do your 100% minus 11.21%, and then that's going to give you, so I'll grab my calculator, and that would be 88.79%. So you could find your oxygen by doing it that way, or you could do it the way that I have set up here. So in my calculator, I'm going to do 16 divided by 18.02 times 100, and I'll get the exact same thing. Depending on how you round things, every once in a while, the answer that you would get by subtracting from 100 might be a tiny bit different than the answer that you get by doing the actual second element. I wouldn't worry about that. So either way is fine. For something like a Schoology assessment, we will pick ones that are the same no matter which method you choose, so you won't get it wrong. So for this one, in my calculator, it's 88.790233, and I want 2 decimal places. The 0 does not round the 9, so 88.79%. And those will be my 2 percentages. That one is for hydrogen, and this one is for oxygen. Okay, so let's try one now that is a little bit more difficult. So let's go ahead and do calcium phosphate. All right, so if we took a couple minutes and figured out the formula for calcium phosphate, you would see that it is Ca3PO4 2. That's your formula. So again, sometimes it'll say, give the percent of calcium, or give the percent of phosphorus, or give the percent of oxygen. It'll ask you for just one of the elements, but we're going to solve for all 3 of them. All right. So the first thing we want to do is determine the molar mass. So we're going to set it up the way we did before. So we've got 3 calcium, so we're going to do 3 times. If you look on your periodic table and round calcium's mass, you will get 40.08. And then I'm going to add that to my phosphorus, and don't forget that that 2 on the outside goes with the phosphorus and the oxygen. So I have 2 times. If I look at the atomic mass for phosphorus, it's 30.97. And then I'm going to add that to my oxygens. And I have 4 2 times, so it's going to be 8. And then oxygen is 16.00. I'm going to grab my calculator and let's add all of this up. And we're going to do 3 times 40.08 plus, and then I like to use the parentheses. So to be honest, I set it up in my calculator exactly the way you see it here. So then I would do plus 2 and then a parenthesis, 30.9 times 30.97, or just parenthesis would be your times, I guess, plus 8 and then parenthesis, 16, and then close the parenthesis. And you're going to get 310.18, and that's going to be grams per mole. So if it was just asking for calcium, I would do 3 times 40.08 divided by my total, which is 310.18, times 100, and I would get my answer. But in this case, I want you to do all of them. So we're going to do 310.18 and 310.18. And then all of those answers, because they are percentages, are times 100. So I'm going to do 40.08 times 3. And then I'm going to divide that by 310.18 times 100. And I get, and the part that I'm doing right now, you don't need to write down necessarily. I'm just showing you what my thought process is. So I need 2 decimal places. That 4 is not going to change anything. So it's just 38.76% for calcium. That's my first one. And then I'm going to do 2 times 30.97. And then I'm going to divide that by 310.18 times 100. So I get 19.96905, 2 decimal places. So you're only looking at the 9. It is going to round the 6. So 19.97% for your phosphorus. And then, as I've mentioned before, you could do 100 minus those 2 numbers in the boxes, 100 minus the two numbers in the boxes to get your oxygen, or you could simply solve for it by doing 8 times 16 divided by your 310.18 times 100. And I'm going to get 41.266. I want two decimal places. So that 6 will round that one to 41.27%. And that's oxygen. All right, we're going to try one more. And for this next one, I'm going to ask you just for one specific element. Okay. All right. So for the next one, I want to know what percentage of glucose is oxygen. So glucose is C6H12O6, and I want to know what percentage of it is oxygen. So we're going to find our molar mass first. So we're going to do 6 times carbon's mass, which is 12.01, plus, and then we're going to do 12 times hydrogen's mass, which is 1.01, plus 6 times oxygen's mass, which is 16.00. And we're going to plug all that in the calculator, and we're going to get 180.18, and that's going to be grams per mole. All right. Okay, so at this point, since I only want oxygen, I don't need to put all of those over the total. I'm just going to do the part that's oxygen. So 180.18 times 100. And I'm going to grab my calculator. And so then I'm going to do 6 times 16 equals, and then divided by 180.18 times 100. And I get 53.280, which the zero is not going to change anything, so it's just 53.28% oxygen, and that would be the answer for that problem. All right, so now what you want to do is use these notes that you took to go ahead and do the Schoology puzzle piece assignment. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask your teacher.